The sun on Ravos never slept, and the heat never stopped breathing fire. Wind blew across the endless sand with a dry hiss that scraped the skin and made every breath feel like breathing smoke. This planet was dust and stone and hunger and thirst. No rivers, no rain, no clouds in the sky. Just endless sky that burned above and a ground that cracked below. A research outpost stood on a ridge of red, rock far from any city or shelter. The buildings were made of strong metal walls, sealed tight to protect those inside from the brutal air outside. This outpost was a joint effort between two species. One was human, and the other was a race known as the Virellans. The Virellans came from a world of order and reason. They walked tall and moved with purpose. Their skin was pale silver, and their eyes cold like frozen water. They believed in control above all things. No emotion, no weakness, no chaos. Among them was one called Lyra. She was younger than most others of her kind, but already respected for her sharp mind and perfect logic. She never raised her voice, never showed anger or fear. But she had brought something unusual with her to Ravos. She had brought pets. The creatures were called Keru. They were small, soft, and fragile. Their fur was light blue and shimmered under the sun. They moved with slow, graceful steps, and their eyes were wide, full of innocence. They needed water every few hours or their bodies would weaken. On their home planet, they lived near streams and dew-filled caves. Here on Ravos, they struggled. The humans found it strange that a being like Lyra, who followed logic, would care for such weak animals. She fed them carefully and carried them in a soft box lined with cooling crystals. Every night she cleaned their fur and watched them sleep. She never said why she loved them, but her actions said more than words could ever do. Then the storm came. It started with the wind screaming louder than ever before. The sky turned orange and then deep red. A wall of sand raced across the plains and slammed into the outpost. The power grid failed. The supply routes were cut off. The machines that brought water from the deep ground stopped working. Every tank of water became precious. The command center declared emergency rationing. Every drop was counted. Every mouthful was tracked. Virellans were calm. They followed the orders without question. Humans were tense but obeyed. Everyone hoped the storm would pass in days. But days became a week. Then two. Inside her room, Lyra sat in silence. Her Keru lay still, barely moving. Their breath slow and dry. She had already given her share of water to them, but it was not enough. She sent a request to the Virellin command, asking for just a small extra supply. Just enough to keep the Keru alive. The reply was cold. Non-essential life forms were not a priority. Resources were for sentient beings only. Lyra stood outside the command center and waited for someone to speak to her. No one did. She turned and walked away without argument. But her steps were slower. Her hands stayed closed at her sides. Something inside her shifted like a glass cracking under pressure. The humans saw her pets fading. Some looked away. Some whispered, but no one stepped forward. No one wanted to give away water that might be their own last chance. Except one. His name was Adam. He was not a leader. He was not strong or famous. He worked with wires and pipes, fixing what others broke. He was quiet, observed more than he spoke. He watched Lyra every day and noticed the way her eyes stayed on the Keru longer now. He saw the way her fingers trembled when she picked them up. She tried to hide her worry, but Adam saw it. He sat on his bunk one night, holding a pouch in his hands. It was half full, maybe less. Enough for 1 or 2 drinks. He could keep it for himself, or trade it, or lock it away. But instead he stood up and walked. The halls were quiet. Most were sleeping or pretending to. The lights buzzed above his head. He reached Lyra's room and paused. Then he knocked once. The door opened. She looked at him with tired eyes. He held out the pouch. She said nothing. Her eyes moved from his hand to his face. She stepped back to let him in. He knelt beside the small bed where the Kiru lay. One tried to lift its head but could not. He opened the pouch and poured a slow stream into a tiny bowl. Lyra reached down and helped the smallest Kiru drink. Then the others. Slowly their eyes brightened. Their paws moved again. A faint sound like a sigh escaped one of them. Lyra stared at them, then looked at Adam. Her voice was low. "This was your water, Adam." Nodded. "Why? Because they need it more than I do." She wanted to speak, but words failed her. In her world, no one gave without reason. But this human had no reason other than kindness. It made no sense. And yet, it felt right. That night a change began on Ravos. Not in the weather, not in the machines, but in the hearts of those who watched and listened. That morning arrived without light, only heat and silence. The sun rose behind a thick wall of orange dust that hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Inside the outpost, the air was still dry, heavy, and stale. Filters worked slower now. Machines coughed. People walked with tired steps. The storm had not ended. It had simply decided to stay. Lyra sat near the Kiru with hands folded in her lap. Her eyes stayed on the small creatures who slept without peace. Their fur looked dull now, their breathing soft like it might stop any second. She had measured the last few drops Adam had given, used every bit carefully. But now the bowl was empty again, and there was nothing more to give. She had no more water. No more hope in her own supply. Her request to the Varellan command had been final. No second appeal. The logic remained unchanged. If something cannot help the mission, it has no use. The Kiru had no value on paper, no strength, no data, no language, only life. But that life was not considered important. Lyra tried not to feel. Her kind were trained to obey reason, to keep their minds clear of emotion. But her fingers still reached out and brushed the soft heads of the Kiru. Her chest felt tight. Something inside her broke like a thread snapping quietly. She walked into the common area where humans sat around dry food packs and warm water bottles. Conversations were low, careful, and short. No one laughed. No one joked. Everyone watched. The storm outside with worry in their eyes. Lyra stood at the edge. Her silver skin had lost some shine. She looked thinner now. Tired, she opened her mouth but closed it again. She had already made her request to the leaders. She could not ask strangers. Not directly. So she turned and walked away again, but Adam saw her. He watched her go and felt something stir in his chest again. He had given his last pouch 2 days ago. He had not said it aloud, but he knew he could not take it back. He drank from shared stock now, like everyone else. Less each day. His lips stayed dry. His steps slower. Still he kept checking the Kiru every evening. He passed by Lyra's door and waited a moment before moving on. She never asked for more. But her silence spoke louder than words. In the Varellan sector, the others held meetings. They reviewed numbers and charts, calculated survival chances, argued over shipment delays. One suggested that Lyra should remove the Kiru herself, to let them pass in peace. Another reminded them that sentiment was weakness. Lyra stood at the back of the room and said nothing. Later that day she found a small glass tube near her door. Inside were 3 tiny drops of water sealed tight. No note, no name, just the gift. She looked down the hallway but saw no one. She picked it up and closed the door. She used it that night. 1 drop each. The Kiru licked it from her fingers. Their tongues moved slow and dry but alive. That same night Adam felt his throat burn like fire. He sat up in bed and held his stomach. His head ached. His skin felt hot. He had worked longer that day in the solar bay, trying to repair a cracked panel. The sun had punished him. Now his body was telling him it was near the edge. But when he closed his eyes, he saw the Kiru again. Saw their small paws, their silent eyes. The way they moved closer to Lyra after drinking. He smiled through the pain. He had no regrets. In the days that followed, whispers began to spread. Some humans started to wonder, why did the Varellans ignore? Life so small and helpless. Why did none of them care? Why did only Adam act? Questions passed from one room to another like sparks in dry grass. A few even offered Adam their ration share, but he refused. He said he had made his choice. The Varellans remained quiet. They stayed in their section, watched from afar, spoke only when needed. But even among them, a few began to question. Lyra's actions had caused something new, something they had no word for. Some called it emotional deviation. Others called it unnecessary distraction. But no one could deny that something had changed in her. Lyra began to speak less in meetings. She stopped bringing data reports. Instead, she stayed near the Kiru almost all day. She checked their breath, cleaned their fur with a damp cloth made from her own recycled moisture. She watched them sleep, her face calm but her hands never still. Then came the day one of the Kiru stopped moving. Lyra shook it gently, waited, listened. Nothing. She sat there for a long time, not moving, not speaking, just watching the little body that had gone still. Forever. She did not cry. Her kind did not do that. But her back curled inwards. Her hands gripped the sides of her seat, and her head bowed low. Later she placed the small body in a cloth and carried it outside past the gates, past the walls. She walked into the storm without a suit, just her regular gear. She placed the body under a stone and returned. No one stopped her. Number 1 spoke. Adam watched all this from a window, his jaw tight, his heart heavy. He knew that feeling, that pain. He had seen it before in places far from this world. He understood loss in ways others never would. When Lyra came back, she sat near the other two Kiru, who now curled together without energy. She placed her hand over them and whispered something in her language. That night another small container appeared near her door. More than 3 drops this time. She did not need to check who it was from. The wind outside howled like a wild beast trapped in endless rage. Sand raced across the sky in fast circles, scratching against every wall, every door, every crack. The sun no longer gave warmth, only white light that burned the eyes and made everything feel sharp and dry. Inside the outpost, the mood had turned heavy. People moved slow, spoke less, avoided each other's eyes. Water levels dropped again, and tension grew. Like fire under dry leaves. Every bottle, every pouch, every drop became more valuable than anything else. Water was now life itself. Adam sat near a broken panel, staring at the wires like they were faraway memories. His hands were rough and dusty, his throat dry for the 3rd day. The pain in his head came and went in waves like heat from the ground. Outside, but his mind did not think about himself. His thoughts stayed with Lyra and the small soft lives still fighting in her quiet room. He had nothing left. No secret pouch, no hidden source. He had given all he had. Still he could not forget the way the Kiru had lifted their heads, the way their little paws reached out when they tasted water again. It had changed him in a way he could not explain. In the other wing, Lyra sat in silence beside her remaining 2 Kiru. Their breath was slow, their eyes open, but dull. Their tiny bodies had grown weaker even after the help Adam had given. The air in her room felt warm, but not safe. Like hope might walk away at any moment. She stared at the door, remembering the last container he had left for her. She never asked for it, never expected it, but it had come again and again. Always without a word. Always when needed the most. Her hands moved over the fur of the smallest Kiru. She cleaned its ears and whispered soft sounds into the quiet space. She did not know why she did it. No one had taught her this. No code, no training, no logic could explain her behavior now. The door opened. Adam stood there, his steps weak but firm. He held nothing in his hands. His face looked pale and dry, his lips cracked from heat. He stepped inside and sat down without speaking. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she opened her hand and showed him the empty container. "They are almost gone," her voice was calm but low, like the end of a song that had no more verses. Adam nodded. He reached into the inside of his jacket and pulled out a small bag made of cloth and plastic. It looked thin, almost flat. But when he pressed, water moved inside a small stream, just enough to notice. Lyra stared at it, then at him. Her eyes did not blink. Her hands did not move. "You will need this soon," Adam shook his head. "They need it now." He placed the bag near the bowl and leaned back against the wall, breathing slow, trying to hide how tired he felt. Lyra did not take it right away. She sat there, still thinking, still calculating, still unsure. But her eyes kept falling on the two small bodies, still clinging to life. She opened the bag, poured a little into the bowl, and watched. The older Karoo moved first, licking once, then again. The younger followed, its tongue slow but steady. A small sound came from its throat, like a hum. The kind of sound made only when pain becomes less. Lyra looked at Adam again. His head had tilted back, his eyes closing for a second, then opening again. She walked over and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Why do you keep doing this?" He opened his eyes and looked up at her. "Because they matter to you." And now Tamesh did not answer. She sat beside him in silence, and for the first time in her life, silence felt full, empty. Hours passed. Adam rested while Lyra watched the Karoo regain strength. Their eyes opened wider, their paws stretched. Not much movement, but enough to see life had not left yet. She cleaned the bowl again, gave a little more, and held them close. Outside voices began to rise. The storm had broken one of the solar towers. Emergency repairs were needed. Human workers gathered in suits, ready to walk into the storm. Adam stood up slowly, pain in his back legs heavy. He reached for his tool belt. Lyra stood as well. "You are not well. I will be worse if I stay still," she nodded. Then walked to the table, poured the last few drops from the pouch into a clean flask and handed it to him. He looked at it confused. "You gave me this. I return it to you now." He did not argue. He took the flask, placed it into his suit pocket, and left. Outside, the wind pulled at his suit and pushed him sideways. The sand hit like needles. The light above flickered through dust clouds. He moved with the team, fixing wires, holding poles, replacing broken shields. Sweat rolled inside his helmet, even where there was no water left in his body. Inside the outpost, Lyra sat and waited. She checked the systems, read the weather scans, listened to reports. Her eyes moved, but her thoughts stayed with the man outside, risking more than just his strength. Risking his last strength for life he did not own. Hours passed. Then the door opened again. Adam walked in, slower this time. His steps dragged, his face pale. The flask still in his hand, untouched. He gave it back to her. "I did not need it." Lyra looked at him, and for the first time her voice broke. "The rules of her kind. You did not need to do anything, but you still chose to. That is what I do." He smiled faintly, then sat down again beside the small creatures, who now looked up at both of them with calm eyes and gentle hearts that had been saved not by logic, not by power, but by choice. The storm still raged outside, but inside the outpost, something else had started. A quiet shift, a movement in the hearts of those who had watched too long without speaking. People who had stayed silent now whispered. Eyes that once looked away now stared. Everyone knew about the Karoo. Everyone had seen the human engineer walking slow and dry every day, yet still giving water to the helpless. Adam had become more than a man with tools. He had become something else. A question, a mirror, a challenge. He had changed the meaning of sacrifice without asking for praise. He had done what others feared to do. And now everyone felt it in the air. The Varellan leaders sat around a cold metal table inside the command room. The walls buzzed with machines, the screens filled with maps and numbers. Their faces stayed unreadable, their voices calm. But beneath their smooth words was confusion. They spoke about survival rates, about water ratios, about delays in transport. Then one brought up the matter of the human and the pets. Not by name, not directly. Just a comment about emotional actions disrupting logical order. Another added that kindness without purpose can bring harm in long missions. Lyra stood at the far end of the table. She waited until the voices stopped. He gave more than water. Her voice was steady but deep. He gave something none of us considered important. They turned to her with still faces. The Kairu are not important to our goals. She stepped forward. Then maybe our goals are missing something. That statement hung in the room like a spark near dry leaves. The silence after it was long and thick. One of the older leaders replied with a tone. Both calm and sharp. Emotion must not guide action. Emotion leads to error. Logic ensures survival. Lyra looked at them one by one. Then how do you explain his survival? He gave when he had nothing left, yet he is still here. Still strong, still working. His act did not bring failure. It brought meaning. The room had no answer. Only silence again. Meanwhile, in the human sector, news traveled faster. Adam had become something between a hero and a mystery. Some admired him openly. Others kept quiet, but watched him with new eyes. No one called him foolish anymore. A young technician brought him food without asking. Another left a sealed pouch near his tools. These were small things, but they meant something. People were changing. Later that day, Lyra walked into the human common room. Everyone stopped what they were doing. She looked different. Not in appearance, but in presence. Stronger. Softer. Real. She spoke clearly. This human gave life to those I could not save. He acted without reward, without duty, without instruction. He showed me a part of existence I never understood. And I want to understand it now. No one moved for a moment. Then Adam stood from his seat and walked to her. You do not need to thank me. Do not offer thanks. I offer understanding. Smiled at her, and for the first time she returned it. Not a full smile, but something close enough. That night the council met again. This time human leaders joined. They brought a proposal. It was not about supplies or repairs. It was about values. They wanted to revise the mission structure. They wanted acts of compassion to be counted as acts of strength. They wanted to change what was written in the Code of Survival. At first, the Varellans disagreed. But Lyra stood again. Her voice no longer soft but clear and sharp. We cannot call ourselves advanced if we cannot see the value in mercy. We cannot speak of logic if we cannot see the pattern in kindness. The room stayed quiet again. Not from fear, but from thought. After hours of talk and silence, a decision was made. Not a full change, not yet, but a start. A shift. A new section was added to the mission code. Emotional intelligence was now a recognized skill. Not just tolerated but respected. Adam sat alone on the edge of the observation deck. The sky above showed stars now. The storm had passed. The ground was still dry and cracked, but the wind was calm. He looked out across the desert and breathed slow. Lyra joined him and sat without a word. The two Kiru lay curled in her lap, warm and resting. You have changed much, she nodded. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. He looked at the small creatures sleeping beside her. They seem better. They are alive because of you, because of us. Lyra looked up at the stars on my world. I never looked at the sky unless I needed information. Now I look just to see it. That is new. Adam leaned back against the wall. Maybe we all needed something new. She nodded again. The outpost felt different now. Lighter, not in air, not in sound, but in spirit. People walked with more than fear. They walked with memory, with thought, with a strange kind of strength, born not from orders but from choice. The story of the human who gave his last drop became part of reports, part of training, part of history. But for Lyra and Adam, it was never a story. It was something real, something that would stay with them long after the mission ended. The days on Ravos passed slower now, but they no longer felt empty. The storm had faded into memory. The sky no longer burned red. It still carried heat, it still held silence, but something inside the outpost had changed. Not the machines, not the rules, but the hearts of those who lived there. Water remained limited, but not impossible. A new supply route opened again after the sand cleared from the valley. The cargo ships arrived one by one, bringing clean water, food, medicine, and tools. The crisis had ended on the outside, but its effect stayed deep inside. Everyone. Adam returned to his daily work in the solar towers and the cooling units. His hands fixed wires, his feet climbed ladders, his eyes stayed sharp even when his body felt tired. But now when people passed him, they greeted him with more than words. They brought respect, quiet smiles, shared flasks, a nod that carried meaning. Without sound, Lyra stayed close to her two Kiru, who now walked with soft steps and curious eyes. Their fur shined again, their energy returned, and their trust in her never faded. She no longer hid them inside quiet rooms. She brought them to the common area, placed a soft cloth on the floor, and let them rest near her feet while she studied or spoke with others. She also changed her reports. Before she wrote numbers and codes, charts and timelines. Now her reports carried something else. Her words told stories. Her words shared feelings. She wrote about the moment one small creature lifted its head to drink. She described the first time one of them touched her hand without fear. She wrote about Adam without using his name. She called him the one who gave more than water. Her superiors questioned her change. One asked her in a message why she had left the old structure of logic. Her reply was short and simple: I have seen something stronger than logic. They did not reply. Again. One morning the human and Varellan leaders arranged a gathering in the central hall. Not for a warning, not for a repair schedule, but for something new. They called it an honor ceremony, but not for medals or promotion. It was meant to mark a moment. To mark the shift that had begun when one man gave his last drop. People gathered without being ordered. They stood shoulder to shoulder. Varellans stood next to humans without space between them. The air was quiet, but not tense. It held something different. It held peace. The lead speaker was a Varellan elder who once called emotion a weakness. His voice remained calm, but his words carried weight. We have long believed in reason without feeling. We thought survival depended only on strength and logic, but we were wrong. Survival means more. Survival means sacrifice. It means choice. It means giving when there is nothing left to give. He turned toward Adam and raised his hand in a gesture not seen before from his kind. Humans showed us what our books never taught. Adam stepped forward, not to speak, not to take, but to stand. He looked across the hall and saw faces that now looked back with open eyes. Eyes that saw not just a worker, but a soul. Lyra walked to his side holding the two Kiru in her arms. She placed them down near him and stepped back. The creatures moved to his feet and sat there quietly. They did not fear him. They had never feared him. Adam reached down and placed his hand near them. They touched it with soft paws and leaned close. No one clapped. No one cheered. The moment did not need noise. It needed silence. A silence that held meaning. After the gathering, life returned to normal tasks, but it no longer felt like before. Humans and Varellans worked together without invisible lines. They shared food, shared tools, shared time. The change was slow, but it was real. Lyra visited Adam's station every evening now. Sometimes she brought questions. Sometimes she brought nothing. He always welcomed her. They spoke in short sentences. Sometimes they said nothing at all. But each silence held comfort. One evening as the stars filled the sky, Lyra asked him a question. Why? Did you really do it? Adam looked up at the stars and then at the ground, because it felt right, not because you wanted reward. No, not because you wanted to change the system. No then. What, because they were alive and I could help? She said nothing for a while. Then she nodded. That is what makes you human, maybe that is what I want to understand. Adam looked at her and smiled. Then, you are already halfway there. In the weeks that followed, the mission goals were updated. A new section was added to the training guide. It was called Emotional Responsibility. It taught that strength without kindness is hollow. It showed that logic without compassion is incomplete. The story of the human who gave his last water spread to other colonies. People told it in mess halls on long trips during night shifts. They told it not as a tale of science, but as a tale of heart. Some said it was small. Just a few creatures saved, just one man. But those who understood knew it was not small at all. It was the beginning of something greater. One act, one choice had created a new path. Not a path of power or conquest, but a path of care. A path where life mattered not by size or use, but by being. Adam never asked for thanks. He never changed how he worked, how he spoke, or how he lived. He remained the same. Quiet, steady human. But around him the world had shifted, and somewhere deep in the desert under a silent sky, two small creatures slept near a man who once gave his last drop without expecting anything in return. That was what made him human. That was what made the story whole. The end.